Welcome back to 7th Grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be talking about the everyday craziness that is in the news headlines right now and why some of this stuff may be happening. So let's start by saying that the new moon, the lunar cycle that began on January 1st, 2023, saw some very crazy things happening in the news media cycle. The full moon was on February 5th, 2023. The last quarter of the moon was on February 13th, 2023. So let's go to January 27th, 2023, 6 days after the new moon. There was a 16-car train derailment in Keachie, Louisiana. It caused the residents to evacuate from their homes after over 10,000 gallons of acidic anhydride and less than 1,000 of propionic fluids were spilled as a result of this train derailment. That was the first one. This one did not get a lot of news media coverage, and there's a good reason for that. But we'll get to that in a second. But on to the next and most highly publicized train derailment that happened on February 3rd in East Palestine, Ohio. The train, which derailed on February 3rd, was carrying hazardous materials, including at least 5 tanker cars of vinyl chloride, a colorless but hazardous and carcinogenic gas used to produce PVC plastic and vinyl products. Norfolk Southern officials said some of the cars carrying the vinyl chloride were not breached during the crash but were at risk of exploding. So the crews released and burned the contents of those train cars. And on February 6th, creating a massive smoke plume above the town for several hours, emitting a lot of toxic fumes and gases for people to breathe in the area. Now, what you don't hear about is the media blackout of the residents and their complaints about their medical conditions in the immediate area.
Were you able to find the video I told you about where they were jailing that journalist?
No, but hold on one second. Now see, when vinyl chloride burns, it decomposes into hydrogen chloride and phosgene. Phosgene is highly poisonous and was used extensively during World War I as a choking agent, while hydrogen chloride is irritating and corrosive to any tissue with which it comes into contact with. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources estimates that 3,500 fish of 12 different species, none of which are endangered, died after the crash approximately 7.5 miles of streams south of the town, which has now contaminated the river that flows all the way down to Tennessee and possibly Georgia.
Remember that gas, when it hits water, that's when it becomes hydrochloric acid, and that's some ridiculous shit because it's everywhere.
So now you have this acid river that's just flowing down. Ooh, boy.
Okay, the crazy part, when we grew up, there was a term called acid rain. This is what they were talking about. when those byproducts there was a much smaller scale, of course.
But those byproducts, when they were being manufactured, those plumes of smoke that came out of the factory went up into the air and spread across the cities and got into the rain clouds above the cities. We
learned about this in 2nd, 3rd grade. Like literally back in the day, you would see statues rusting away. Not because they were rusting. It was literally from this hydrochloric acid, this acid in the rain, eating away at buildings and statues. That was a big part of the cleanup when we were kids. Like, hey, don't do this. Don't use this kind of aerosol. Look, the point my brother's making is that these derailments, this is a serious thing. And whenever it happens, these people downplay it. They always downplay it. So it's very difficult to get an actual accurate assessment of how bad the situation is. And they only evacuated a very small area, considering that if you get a chance, go watch some of these videos. These clouds go on for miles. These clouds were huge, and they were calling it a controlled burn, which is something that they tend to do when there's a chemical spill because they figure, okay, we can burn it off. But when you burn these chemicals, the byproducts are sometimes worse than the chemicals themselves. I know that's hard to believe. And I think what it is, they're trying not to have an explosion, but what they're really doing is they're fighting a PR battle in the physical world. You understand what I'm saying? Like they're literally trying to, okay, we want to make this as less as possible,
right?
So we can report.
But they're not. When you cover the perspective of the people that are suffering, actual people, everyday people, then you got a problem. So then you want to silence investigative reporters that are digging into the information. So tell us about this black investigative journalist that got arrested.
There's a journalist up there, and there was some kind of public meeting. He goes and starts asking serious questions. And I don't want to lie, it was either the mayor or the governor, it was a female, had him arrested. And the brother was simply asking, what about this? What about this? He had already started investigating the situation. And there are people in the area who do not know about it. There's people who live in Ohio that didn't know about it. Now, what they're saying is now the local news is doing a much better job, and what's being reported in the local news is not the same as what's being reported in the national news. But even then, there are people in Ohio that don't know. But this brother was handcuffed and was arrested. I'll send you the video. But it's really important because in this day and age, when we talk about journalists being co-opted by special interests, when you got one lone brother out there reporting the real news and trying to really worry about people's well-being, this is what the press was for. This is what the media is for, is so you can make an accurate decision. Second, some of these people probably need to evacuate themselves. Like, you know what? I'm looking up. I see this big black cloud over the sky going on for miles, 20 miles, and it's daytime. You know what I'm saying? This looks like a storm cloud. It's not. This is daytime. This is what's being burned off. Man, you need to get the hell out of Dodge because this is going to have prolonged effect. Oh, you're talking about the other thing. You're talking about animals in the wild, but pets were dying too. There's a lot of birds and pets and dogs, cats, people's animals are dying because
cows, horses, livestock.
Yes, livestock. They were exposed. I don't think people really understand how much. Another thing, when people talk about trains, you're assuming that you think about sneakers, you're thinking about TVs. You're not realizing this is how they move oil. This is how they move. And that's another thing that they were talking about with this spill, that there was petroleum that was spilled also. Everybody's talking about that vinyl chloride you were talking about, but there's an oil spill going on at the same time. That there were other things inside that one train. And I think people are just worried about the scarier shit, not realizing oil is messing up shit really bad. That's some environmental stuff that takes years to clean up. Well, we've seen how this goes. We've seen the effect, head down in the Gulf. So just a small oil spill can last for years.
Okay, so 10 days later, February 13th, 2023, in Houston, Texas, another train derailed when an 18-wheel truck ran into a Union Pacific train. The truck driver died and 21 rail cars were derailed, and an estimated 100 gallons of diesel fuel was released by the truck involved in the crash. The same day, at 4:00 p.m., a train derailed in Enoree, South Carolina. So that's in the course of 10 days, 3 trains get derailed. All right. 6 days later, on the 16th of February, 2023, a train derails in Van Buren Township, a suburb outside of Detroit, Michigan. There were 6 train cars derailed in an accident. Authorities in Van Buren Township, Michigan, warned residents to avoid the area near the derailment and close the roadways near the incident as authorities investigate the accident. The authorities said there was no evidence and that hazardous materials were exposed since no rail cars carrying such materials were compromised. Okay, what we have are 4 trains being derailed, getting news coverage in the course of 2 weeks. 4 trains. So I'm wondering, how often do trains derail? Is the frequency that high? Because if it was that high, the railroad would be out of business. There's no way that the railroad could sustain that many derailments that often.
Derailments are common and they're uncommon. It's just like a car accident.
Okay. Yes, I understand that. But this frequency is really high and it's suspect, dude.
No. I'm not saying it's not suspect. I'm not going there. What I'm simply referring to is something else that people don't know when derailments happen. One, they're not easy to cause. Like you just discussed one. With the railroad I'm familiar with, you discussed one where an 18-wheeler hit a train. Crossing accidents can cause derailments. And a lot of the derailments are caused by that right there.
So the accident outside of Houston, Texas, was caused because of the railroad crossing did not have the appropriate crossbars and warning signals.
No, not at all.
That rail crossing in that part of Texas just had a yield sign. And the truck driver in that scenario did not yield to the oncoming train.
Yeah, well, no, I'm trying to explain that to you. That is actually quite often. A lot of these semis, what the guy will do is pull on the tracks and actually stop because this sounds so bad. There's a stoplight, right? There's a crossing. They'll pull across a crossing and the light turns red, and they sit there and now they hear a train coming. The crossing lights come on. You see the things coming down. You would think this guy would back up or go forward or something. They don't. Or you'd be surprised, like you talked about the one where they had a yield sign. You mean to tell me the guy couldn't see the train? They'll keep going and hit the train. The explosion will cause it. The heating of the track will cause it. There's a lot of different stuff that causes it. I don't like talking about it because I don't want to give somebody dumbass ideas from domestic terrorism shit. But you'd be surprised that this is the dumbest one. Didn't cause a derailment. A guy was high. He pulled on the track. I'm talking to the engineer. The engineer told me about the story. He's like, yeah, this guy pulled on the track. He had a raggedy ass Toyota truck, right, with no bed on it. He pulls on the track. He said, all we can do is blow the horn. A train can't stop. A train takes a mile to stop. And so they hit this guy. The police get there. They finally stop the train. Literally a mile later, everybody's being interviewed, whatnot. The guy was in there high. He had 21 hound dogs in the front seat of this truck, and he was just smoked a bunch of weed. Couldn't hear the train. Stuff like now, if there was a bigger
21?
truck, yes, he had 21 dogs in the front of a small Toyota. They were just all crammed in there, and he was high already. He was smoking weed right there. He was chilling.
That's the worst example of a weed smoker ever.
I digress because I agree because I
on behalf of everybody that smokes weed, that motherfucker does not represent us.
Yeah, he's not, yeah, he lost his membership. Like I said, the derailment thing. The question that you asked is yes, they're frequent, and there's various reasons. Everything from the track being maintained. Some of the smaller railroads don't have as much money, or even the fact that some of this stuff you can't tell me ain't staged because it's actually. It's hard to derail a train due to the weight, but there are other factors. And the question that you pose is the fix in. There's a movie out that was filmed in that area of Ohio. I forgot the name of it. You know the name. And
the movie's called White Noise. It's on Netflix right now. What is odd about all of this is that this movie was shot and finished in 2017 and placed on the shelf. Okay, and so that you can't, in Hollywood terms or circumstances, you can't use the excuse of, well, the coronavirus caused a shutdown and we didn't know what to do with. No, this movie got shelved because because this movie was a piece of shit. And I'm like, well, we can't do anything with this fucking movie. Nobody wants to watch this fucking movie. And then all of a sudden, this movie gets released. Now, what's odd is that, okay, I saw the advertisements for this movie on Kodak's website. So I'm on Kodak's website because I'm a filmmaker and I'm interested in like what movies are coming out shot on film. And they show you that on Kodak's website, right? It's called the shot on film section. And so you see this movie called White Noise and I'm like, oh, okay, Adam Driver, the guy that plays Kylo Ren in Star Wars, he's going to be in it. I'm like, interesting, okay. And then I look it up, and I see that it was shot a long time ago. And I'm like, almost 5 years ago. I'm like, weird. Okay, whatever. So the only time a movie gets shelved for that long is if there's some type of legal trouble, where they couldn't get a copyright clearance or they're worried about something, or somebody in the production staff, they were involved in some type of like allocation legally or sexually.
Like, remember Chris Brown had that movie.
Third, the movie is just a complete piece of shit.
Hold it. You left one out. What if they don't want to give people ideas? What if like the government? Oh, the FBI. Like, nah, that'll give people ideas of how to do terrorism. Let's not put that out. Shit like that.
What's strange is that this movie was on Kodak's website probably about 4 months before it even got a release date. So they were planning to release it sometime this year, but they didn't because of whatever reason. And then all of a sudden it gets released 3 weeks before this train crash, and then you're like, well, this is weird because now it's in the collective consciousness. And I'm like, huh. So I need to listen, but wait a minute. I need to go now and look at the actual release date of this film in relation to the lunar cycle, because as I told you, The current lunar cycle that we're finishing now began January 21st.
Okay. Okay. Roscoe is actually an authority on certain things. And one of the things he brought to my attention back in the 90s, there's actually a book on this, the Teflon president, about Reagan and his wife. And what they would do is Reagan would only admit certain things during the certain parts of the lunar cycle. And what Roscoe was telling me back then is like, people don't pay attention to certain shit if you announce it on this day. I'm like, that's poppycock, is bullshit. But if you pay attention, he's right. But when there's certain times during the lunar cycle where people, I don't know how to describe it, but they don't pick up on stuff. And Reagan
their psychic energy is dull. Let's put it that way. Their conscious, their idling speed of their brain is very low.
But the reason this is relevant is because he's saying, why would they release something happened major. They tried to hide it. But then on certain days, they release this information in little bits and pieces because you're not going to pay attention. You're going to downplay it. The other part with this movie, the reason everybody's wigging out is because the movie was shot in part of Ohio. And literally, not miles. They said it was so many miles away from this. It's too many.
It was very close.
Yeah, too many crazy coincidences. Now, the other thing I want to bring up, because I thought you were going to touch on it. We went through this with the coronavirus and Netflix. Remember, there's a couple Netflix movies that look just like the coronavirus. The whole Wuhan thing. I mean, it was
that movie Contagion. That came out 2 years before.
Yeah, but it was so spot on. That's my point. So I think it's odd that Netflix had this movie. Whether they produced it or not, but I know this movie went right to Netflix. That was a big deal. How is this not another situation where, okay, these movies is too similar to reality? The fact that it was shot in the area, the fact,
But I got to get to this next part because it's related to everything that we're talking about.
Come on with it.
This is about amen, but this is about something that captured everybody's attention. 4 Chinese balloons. 4 Chinese balloons have flown over North America and the United States. Now, there were 4 known flights prior to February. Before February, 4 flights were shot down in far less time in U.S. airspace. So before this time, of this February shoot down of this Chinese balloon, of all of them actually, they were shot down way quicker. So Japan's Ministry of Defense confirmed on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2023, that the balloons were from China. The Japanese Ministry of Defense also stated that flights also took place on November 2019, June 2020, and September 2021.
Wow.
The initial balloon was 200 feet tall and carried a payload weighing more than 2,000 pounds and was shot down on February 4th off the coast of South Carolina by a missile fired from an F-22 fighter jet. The U.S. Department of Defense received 366 new reports of UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena since March 2021. About half of them appeared to be balloons or drones. So, an initial assessment found that 163 sightings were balloons or balloon-like entities, the report said. So let's talk about the first balloon. The first balloon, we'll give you the timeline. The timeline of the first balloon begins on January 28th, where the balloon entered the U.S. airspace on January 28th north of the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. January 30th, it entered Canadian airspace over the Northwest Territories, and then on January 31st, the balloon traveled south and re-entered U.S. airspace over northern Idaho on January 31st. On February 1st, at 4:21 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, one of the earliest sightings confirmed by ABC News was in Reed Point, Montana. 6:46 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. More than 2 hours later, it was filmed east of Reed Point in Billings, Montana. Other footage captured over Billings over the next hour as civilians wondered what the object was. From Montana, the balloon traveled southeast through South Dakota and Nebraska. Now, I want to stop right there because that area is SAC airspace. So, how is it that a Space Force base, I'm just saying it plain, a Space Force base that launches rockets every day, ladies and gentlemen, and we got the photos and video to prove it. They launch every day, and nobody with all this sophisticated sensor data, can see a balloon at 60,000 feet up, because that's the altitude this balloon travels at, 60,000 feet. That's twice the height of commercial airliners.
Hey, see, here's my question. This is a dumb question. Please forgive me. So how do they control the movement of the balloon? You said it has a 2,000-pound payload, so it has equipment on it. It makes it seem like this is some kind of random shit, but it's not. This thing obviously has a way of controlling itself, and also, well, my brother Park he called it SAC. That's Strategic Air Command for those people who aren't familiar with this area. We grew up in this area, so
listen, you ain't flying shit through that airspace that ain't supposed to be there. Let me tell you that right now. You're not flying a fucking thing through SAC airspace without them giving you permission.
Let me give you an example.
You know why? You know why? Because there's nukes under the ground.
Oh, look. Every morning, the general that runs it, there's a black general out there, and every morning that they take off that one airplane. It's like Air Force One, but it's a little bit different. That's the mobile command, and every day they send it up in the air. They fly around for 3 or 4 hours in a circle and land. They're basically making sure that if a nuke hit this,
those are daily drills that they run with AWACS.
Yes, and that plane right there is a mobile command center, which means that they can fly up above everything and still control the entire military and still run the entire country. And the idea is if the president had to jump up in that some bitch, and they, like you said, they do daily drills. So the idea of a balloon, one, why did we wait so long to shoot it down? That's my question. Two, we've had this conversation on past podcasts. China has been attacking us for years, but they do that weird kind of attack where they poke you. They do the annoying shit to you. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I remember all these articles back in probably 2004 and 2005. Remember they had like E. coli in the toothpaste. Crest had to pull all this stuff off the shelf. Some of the shit wasn't even a real Crest, but the toothpaste had E. coli in it. Come to find out, it came from China. All these pet treats had like fucking antifreeze in them, and people's dogs were dying. I'm like, that's an attack. When you sit there, now it's a petty attack. It's not like I didn't punch you, but I tied your shoestrings together. You know what I'm saying? I didn't kick you in the groin, but I put like super glue in your fucking lock of your car. It's some annoying shit.
It's Chinese water torture.
Yes, it's just a steady drip, and that's what they do. And so the idea of, I didn't know it was 4. You enlightened me, Roscoe. I thought I just figured it was 1 or 2. I did not know there was 4. And the fact that they're doing this on a regular basis. Now here's my question. Since they're big on distraction, what else are they doing that we're not seeing?
Okay, let me finish the trajectory timeline of this fucking balloon. Okay, so the balloon entered U.S. airspace in Alaska, and then it entered Canadian territory, and then it went down to Montana, and then it went down to South Dakota, and then to Nebraska, and then 9:41 a.m. on February 3rd, the social media sightings popped up as the balloon moved southeasterly across the continental U.S., and it was filmed over Sabetha, Kansas. At 11 a.m., over an hour later, it appeared farther east over St. Joseph, Missouri, where it was filmed between 11:56 a.m. and 12:28 p.m. There's video footage is captured of the balloon further east over Cameron, Missouri. About 30 minutes later, it was seen farther south within the Kansas City metro area in Lee's Summit, Missouri, a suburb of Kansas City. The balloon appeared to be heading toward North Carolina, according to a U.S. official familiar with the situation. February 4th, ABC News confirmed several sightings of the balloon in North Carolina by Saturday morning. That same Saturday morning, 8:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the balloon was filmed over Biltmore Park in Asheville, North Carolina. I've been there. I spent a lot of time in Asheville, North Carolina. That's western North Carolina in the mountains. So at 10:22 a.m., the balloon continued to move southeasterly with sightings over Hendersonville and Saluda areas before being captured over Eagle Lake neighborhood in Charlotte. So let me stop for a second. This thing spent a long time in near Asheville, Hendersonville, North Carolina, which is strange. It also, from the looks of it, it spent a good bit of time over Nebraska. So when I'm looking at this, it says, yeah, it's interesting though.
It's very strategic. The locations are strategic. So I don't wonder what's going on in the Carolinas that it's looking at, but I know for a fact the area in Nebraska is something we're familiar with.
What's strange is that from the last sighting was on February 1st was at 6:46 p.m. and then 2 days later at 9:41 in the morning, it was seen over Sabetha, Kansas. It was over Nebraska for a long time. That's crazy. So this, what I'm interpreting from reading this, it was over Nebraska for about at least a day and a half. Oh, I know what they're doing. They were looking at the Space Force launching base.
That's what that's what I would think. I don't know, but that's what they're looking at.
Wait. But nobody's talking about that. And I'm seeing that, and I've seen these different reports. This isn't reported anywhere. What we need to find out if there's anybody in the Omaha area that has photos of this balloon. Now, what we should go back and look at, and what you need to look at, is your footage that you've been shooting, and you need to check and see if there were chemtrail overcast clouds that day. What did we talk about before? About how these fucking chemtrails, they're cloud cover so that stuff can go down.
Look, the best footage I got was the one downtown where you can't tell. Whenever I show people stuff, they're like, "Oh no, that's way up in the sky." So what about this one? The one where I see something, I'm going downtown and I see something come up from the ground, and you see all these chemtrails behind it. You see clouds behind it.
Okay,
this thing was a launch.
Listen,
and I'm like,
all right. So the last one we reported was February 4th, 11:15 a.m., 10:22 a.m. In the Eagle Lake neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina. At 11:15 a.m. on the same day, February 4th, the balloon was captured over South Carolina in Lancaster, South Carolina, as it continued moving southeastward toward the coast. At 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the balloon was seen over the coastal city of Myrtle, South Carolina, near Myrtle Beach, along with the U.S. fighter aircraft close by. At 2:39 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, its voyage came to an end, and the footage was captured of the balloon being shot down over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South Carolina, probably by Myrtle Beach. So that means this jet was flying around this thing for about an hour and 8 minutes before it shot down.
Hey, so another thing, we give China way too much leeway, bro.
Let's get to that in a second, because let's go all the way back. That's February 4th. Let's go back. Let's go back to the first day. So, from the moment this thing flew in the U.S. airspace, January 28th, listen, the U.S., that's a nerve center area because it's close to Russia. So, there's submarines over there. There's an air base over there. There's jets that are fueling all the time and taking off. And they're flying, they're scrambling jets, and they're flying drills and all this stuff, right? So, of course they see this thing. Of course they see this. This shit goes on for 5 days. 5 days, dude. This shit it flies across the U.S. for 5 days at 60,000 feet.
Do you think that thing appears on radar? Because I'm asking because
there's this thing called NASA.
they got cameras everywhere.
Yeah, dude. They got long-range sensors. Hey, matter of fact, everybody's talking about these green Chinese lasers, space lasers, at this Hawaiian observatory. Okay, and NASA has lasers that from satellites that shoot down to the Earth to get telemetry readings or altitude readings. Okay, so of course they saw this thing because one of those lasers hit the balloon. Dude. Okay, let's talk about the second one. The second balloon. On February 9th, another object was seen, and it was said to be a small object According to the Pentagon, it was traveling northeasterly across Alaska, and 2 F-35 fighter jets were sent up to identify it. February 10th, the jets did another flight early that morning to try to learn more, and that flight was ended in a shoot-down. 2 F-22s tracked the object and shot it down near the location of Dead Horse, Alaska, which is right near Prudhoe Bay. So, basically 5 days after the other fiasco, they shot this one down quick. Okay, look, there's a third one. The same day that one was shot down, the North American Aerospace Defense Command detected a high-altitude object over Alaska later that day on February 10th. 2 F-22 fighter jets monitored the object over Alaska, and then the Canadian aircraft joined it as it crossed into Canadian airspace. The next day, following a call from a Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau from Joe Biden, Biden authorized that the U.S. aircraft take down the new high-altitude object, and an F-22 shot it down. The object was shot down approximately 100 miles from the U.S.-Canada border in central Yukon. February 11th. Oh, see, do you hear this shit? So basically, instead of the Canadians shooting it down, the Americans shot it down. The Yukon, man. That's like a no man's land. Whatever. Okay, so it appears to have been a small cylindrical object that was flying at about 40,000 feet. These objects were much smaller than the Chinese balloon. All right. Wait. Hold your question. Hold your fire. The fourth flying object was over Lake Huron. On February 12th, another high-altitude object was shot down on the afternoon of February 12th. This one was over Lake Huron, and it was shot down by a U.S. military aircraft. Yes, questions?
Several questions. One, are they able to control the way these things go?
They weigh 2,000 pounds each. That's the weight of a car. So that thing,
they got equipment. They got a ton. Yeah,
there's equipment. There's motors in there. Yes.
Second, they're releasing one after the other. What are they doing? Last but not least, the last two don't sound like balloons. Did we fuck around, shoot down a UFO, trying to shoot down a balloon? Like, you know what I'm saying? Did you shoot down the wrong nigga? No, because suppose you make an enemy because of these Chinese motherfuckers. So let's just say suppose. This is like a movie script right here.
Suppose. After they've been doing it since 2019.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
Suppose it's the Chinese?
No, that's not what I was going to say. I said, suppose there's some aliens, right? And the Chinese are courting these motherfuckers. They're like, look, man, the motherfuckers over there are evil. They're going to shoot down your people. And
or
like,
they some pussies and they ain't going to do nothing. We done punked them so many times. It's ridiculous.
And so, like, we shoot down shit, trying to shoot down Chinese balloons, and we fuck around and shoot down an alien by mistake. Now we done made an enemy. Like, Chinese, they play a different game. Look, all these different situations where these different national disasters are going on, and they're being downplayed. All these different situations where movies proceed these things by months and years, and the plot is damn near exactly the same. That's what I meant by social lubrication. With it, they're getting you ready for this shit. They're getting you used to it. So it's not a topic. And and yes, for the record, Roscoe, what you're asking, I've never known 4 or 5 derailments to take place this close together. But again, I don't work in every railroad, but since I do work in the railroad, when you see articles about the shit, you read them, or when you see stuff about it in the news, you watch it because that's something I'm familiar with. What we're saying is that the powers that be, the fix is in. We don't know if they're trying to kill us off. We don't know if they're trying to prepare us for something else, or we don't know if they're doing this shit to make you vote a different way. They manipulate us on so many different levels. You don't know where they're going with it. Since when's the last time you seen a fucking a reporter get arrested for doing his damn job? There's something else to this shit, and we don't know what it is.
Okay, I can tell you what it is.
Of
These
course.
are weapons of mass distraction.
Distraction. We know.
Would you like to know why?
I'm listening.
Because here's why. On February 8th, within that same lunar cycle, remember, I started this episode off by saying these events began with the new moon in January, which carried over into February. The full moon was on February the 5th. 3 days later, a well-known, decorated investigative journalist named Seymour Hersh published an article on Substack on February 8th, 2023. The New York Times called the Nord Stream pipeline destruction a mystery. But the United States executed a covert sea operation that was kept secret until now. According to Seymour Hersh,
Wow.
an anonymous source with inside knowledge of the operation has confirmed that the U.S. government was involved in the planning and execution of the sabotage, which took place on September 26, 2022. So, hold on, wait. Hold your fire. Listen to this shit. Something like this has been done before. In 1971, the American intelligence community learned from still undisclosed sources that two important units of the Russian Navy were communicating via an undersea cable buried in the Sea of Okhotsk on Russia's far east coast. The cable linked a regional Navy command to the mainland headquarters of Vladivostok. A hand-picked team of CIA and NSA operatives was assembled somewhere in the Washington area under deep cover. They worked out a plan using Navy divers and modified submarines and deep submarine rescue vehicle that succeeded after much trial and error in locating the Russian cable. The divers planted a sophisticated listening device on the cable that successfully intercepted Russian traffic and recorded it on a taping system. That underwater success, codenamed Ivy Bells, was innovative and risky and produced invaluable intelligence about the Navy's intentions and planning. The plan to blow up Nord Stream 1 and 2 was suddenly downgraded from a covert operation requiring the Congress to be informed to one that was deemed as highly classified intelligence operation with the U.S. military support. Under the law, the source explained, there was no longer a legal requirement to report their operation to Congress, and all they had to do now is to just do it. But it still had to be secret. There you go.
Look, the reason this was so important about that pipeline thing, that's literally an ecological disaster, and Biden was responsible for it. He was single-handedly responsible for that shit, and nobody wants to talk about it. He cares about the environment and all that bullshit.
Hold up. But Seymour Hersh is a guy that goes over to rocks and turns them over to find the roly-polies, the bugs, and all the little creatures underneath. He's that guy, okay? So that means that this guy is starting to make noise again. He's been quiet for a long time. And we got somebody watching his computer, monitoring shit.
Yeah.
So as soon as this guy starts typing up this story, he's about to finish his story, and he's about to publish his story. Let's put out a bunch of stuff. Let's do a couple things to throw off the public perception and attention of what's going on, considering the fact that this could tip the scales of public opinion on the war in Ukraine.
What else did you said something very important. You said a lot of things. Anonymous source. How about that part? There's somebody in the Biden administration that had a problem with what they did, because there's no way they got that information. You dig what I'm saying? That was a conscience. Somebody's conscience was like, you know what? I don't agree with this shit anymore. How else do you think that information got out?
Right, but dig this though. Here's something else. See, listen, I gotta say this, y'all. Whenever there's all this craziness going on, there's rah rah rah, shish boom bah, look in the other direction. Yeah, pay attention and get the facts as they first happen, because you get the truth right when the accident or the catastrophe happens. Okay?
When that shit first hits, that's when they're being honest.
Listen,
That's before
listen.
that's
That's when you're
before it
getting the
got.
facts. That's not
Yeah.
anything after that is just commentary, somebody's opinion on the shit. Okay, forget about that. Just get the facts. Now, watch this here. Watch this bullshit. Now, guess what else was happening right before the Chinese balloon went down? Okay, World Economic Forum had their annual meeting. The World Economic Forum had their annual meeting in Davos, which took place January 16th through January the 20th, right before the new moon. Okay? So, Duct Tape mentioned earlier, when you want to do something, you want to do it in a quiet time when nobody's paying attention. When the moon is waning, when it's going down, when it's right before the new moon, there's very little lunar activity that affects people. That's when the collective consciousness is sleeping. Okay? When the moon is at its peak activity, that's when everybody's wilding out and slapping their wives and robbing liquor stores and having affairs. Okay? But at the opposite end of that, at the new moon, that's when it's quiet, right before the new moon. And so that's when they snuck off to their Cobra Temple. Their Cobra Temple in the mountains of Switzerland, right? Davos. And that's when they're planning their shit for this year. Okay?
That's when the music plays, you need to pay attention.
That's it, exactly. So they go to their meeting, and January 16th, January 20th, this was a private meeting. They didn't want to disclose what they were talking about. If you go to the website, there's no itinerary about what they're speaking on, right? Because they don't want you to know. But it brought together the top decision makers from the government, business, and civil society. Okay? That was going on. So we want to take attention away from that, which is right before the new moon, okay? And we want to take attention from what happens right after the full moon, when this guy drops his bombshell news story from what he's learned from military and intelligence insiders. So, why is this important? Because if the people find out about this, their opinion of the war in Ukraine would change.
Might change, yes. The whole deal with there's layers to this war in the Ukraine thing. One of the problems is Ukraine. Look, we've talked about this on the podcast. As Black people, we don't care for them cats because they're really racist. But the problem is, if Russia wins, Poland's next. On the flip side, if Russia loses and they lose faith in the whole country, Russia only has nukes. They don't have a military like they're not the Russia of 1983, the Russia we grew up on. So, but they do have the military. They do have the nuclear threat. We don't need these motherfuckers feeling boxed in and feeling, like we lost. All we got is it's like a kid who takes his ball and goes home. I'm gonna fuck up the whole game. So the thing that Ukraine is important because if people like, we don't belong in this fight, it's stupid, they're full of shit, then all of a sudden Russia, takes over, they get to Ukraine, then they're going for Poland next. Like I said, on the flip side, if the people in America aren't supporting it, what's Biden going to do? What's this administration going to do when people start requesting that you get out of it? Oh, by the way, the name of that reporter is Evan Lambert, the one that was arrested in Ohio at the press conference for asking questions. You look it up. His name is Evan Lambert, and there's plenty of videos of this guy being arrested.
Okay. Well, this is what's going on. There's all this chaos is happening, and there's one thing going on when people are doing something they don't want you to know about. September 11th happened because Larry Silverstein wanted to, number one, get rid of all the asbestos that was in the Twin Towers. It would have cost him too much money to try and remove all the asbestos from the Twin Towers.
$1 billion at least.
Yes. So he found a way to get out of it. And he found a way to loop in the Central Intelligence Agencies and all the other intelligence agencies and the U.S. military. And then they skyhook that into a war in Iraq, which had nothing to do with the war in Afghanistan. Or
Nothing to do with
the war in Afghanistan didn't have to happen because this guy talked to some people that's, who probably are Israeli. It's like, hey, we need some guys we need to create a story where guys with box cutters learn how to fly. Don't learn how to land, but they learn how to fly. And they're going to crash a plane into the towers and get rid of the towers. The only problem is there's way too much fuckery involved with how the towers went down. What's strange about all this is how there were people that were injured that survived. In their pockets, all the pennies had been melted. Not the other coins, just the pennies.
Pennies are made of zinc. What the hell was that about?
Copper.
Pennies are no, they're not made of copper anymore. Only the outside is made of copper. Pennies are made of zinc now. That's some crazy shit.
Check this out.
Look.
So, but see, pennies before a certain time were made of copper.
Yes.
Right. So it's strange that whatever this weapon they used to bring these towers down, these high energy weapons that were used to bring these towers down, and the planes, which there was no parts of a plane found anywhere, which is even more strange.
That's craziness. I never thought about that.
Right. I mean, there would be a jet engine, there'd be a wheel, there would be something. Hold on a second. And then, on top of that, what's even more strange is that it's possible those planes were holographic.
Hold it. The conversation, see, me and you had this talk 20-something years ago when this shit went down. You know what? If you want to dispute the world trades, how they went, but you can't dispute the Pentagon. It's motherfuckers say it was a cruise. You got niggas out there that said they saw a cruise missile. Them niggas never said they saw a plane. And if y'all want to look this shit up, there's a gas station across the street from the Pentagon, and they have video footage, and they confiscated that video footage. And in that video footage, people who worked there, we did not see a plane. Ain't nobody saw a plane. They said that was a missile. They hit that. Now, the crazy part about that, the part of the Pentagon it got hit was being renovated, so nobody got killed and all this crazy. But it's also the part where there were certain files being stored there. This was a way to clean something up. There was some information about to hit that. Was the 50-year mark or the 80-year mark where they got to talk about it?
Those towers were brought down by high energy torsion field physics weapons, and they used holograms to make it seem like planes ran into the buildings. Dude, this is crazy because they're like, how are they making holograms in broad daylight with the sun shining on the buildings and all this shit? Don't you need holograms for darkness?
No, you just answered your own question. You were just talking about the Chinese using a fucking laser pointer.
Oh, fuck. Hold on a second, dude. Listen. So those fucking, holy shit. Those buildings are giant reflectors.
There's so much to talk about with this. Let's see. Okay. Here, again, there is a documentary called In Plain Sight, came out a year and a half after. I don't want to lie about the day. It came out after 9/11. And
2003. It came out in 2003. I was passing that shit around to people.
Yeah, we both were, but that's not like I said. Whenever you watch that, you can dispute the world trade, but you can't dispute the Pentagon. And the one thing that was so important, people don't understand. Jet fuel is actually I can't think of the word right now.
Combustible?
No. It's a
corrosive.
No. There's a word they use. It's actually jet fuel is actually. God, I'm getting old, but jet fuel is a biohazard. It's literally it's another term they use when you can't go in that area.
It's toxic.
Yeah, it's a special kind of toxic. You literally can't go in an area. So if there was a plane crash and that jet fuel was there, people wouldn't be able to go in that area. You had people walking up to the Pentagon taking pictures. If jet fuel is considered as a not toxic waste, but there's another term, and jet fuel is that. And so people would not have been able to approach that stuff. So that tells you that whatever hit the Pentagon was not a airplane. It was not a fucking jet. It couldn't have been. It could not have been. Second, this what you talked about earlier. That whole you got F-16 fighters that fly over DC. Nothing can get in that airspace. Do you think a plane could have gotten that airspace? No. There's so many. Like I said, you could always dispute the World Trade, how you feel about it, but you cannot dispute the Pentagon. That is the most heavily surveillance building in the world. So there's no camera footage of a plane hitting it. But you got camera footage of these planes hitting the World Trade.
You got cameras pointing at cameras in that area.
Yes. There's nobody in that area that is not on film. If you're camera shy, that ain't the place for you to go, my nigga. So what the point we're making is that some of that shit was a dress rehearsal. My homeboy, remember Day before he died? There was a movie with Harrison Ford where they were kind of fucking with the drug dealers, and the guy had a big yellow truck, and they used that laser pointer.
You're talking about Clear and Present Danger, or you're talking about Patriot Games? One of those two.
It's one of those two, and my homeboy was always like, you know what? They had that Ryder truck there, but what if they had a missile hit the building in Oklahoma? And we always talked about that being a dress rehearsal for something else. The bombing in Oklahoma was a dress rehearsal for the shit that went down in New York, because I saw it. I was there for it.
See, here's the problem, though. The people that you think are calling the shots are not calling shots. It's the deep state people that are not elected. They're selected. And they've been in these jobs, like Michael Bolton. They've been in these jobs for 4 decades. Paul Wolfowitz, people like that.
Look, there's an interview with Putin. I just saw it recently. I don't know when it was done. And they ask him about the American president, and he says, "Look, I've known 3 or 4 of them. They all tell me the same thing. And when they get the job, he said, these American presidents, they have great ideas. They're always good men. They're smart men. But then the guys in the suits come to their office and tell them how it really goes."
There's a documentary I should watch. It's called The Power of Nightmares. The Power of Nightmares. I was handing out this documentary back in like 2007. It's a really good. It's like 3 parts to it. It's a really good documentary series.
Look, we got to be careful, but whenever we find a good documentary, whenever we find some good shit, we always have disseminated. We've always given it away free. Like, look, y'all need to watch this. Tell me what you think about this, or you need to read this book. Roscoe's always been big on that. Like I said, he had books about that moon shit way back then. I thought he was an idiot. Then I realized, like, this guy's a genius, because if you look at Reagan, he only reported certain things on certain days, and people were like, he was called the Teflon president for a reason. The point we're making about these derailments, about these Chinese balloons, about the media existing prior to it, and that is to either distract you, smooth the shit over, or put you in a state where it's not a big deal. The biggest thing that we always talk about recently is going to be that AI shit, where everybody's like, AI works, AI is this. AI is, I keep saying, this is artificial imagination. It's not artificial intelligence. Stop giving it that. Because when I was a kid, we grew up watching TV shows and movies and contests about, like, you had a computer that would play chess against a chess master, and the computer couldn't beat the guy. Computers are not better than us. That existence, that is a narrative. That's not a true thing. I work with computers all the time. Them motherfuckers break. They do shit wrong. And the funny thing is, why would you think that computers can outdo you? That's because the people in power now, they want a socialist society where everybody just pays them and works for them, and we have a universal allowance income. That's called socialism. Stop pretending like these guys can see the future. That's the future they want. And if you don't agree with me and you don't believe this when it comes to Elon Musk and these dickheads, go back to the 30s and 40s, because that's the exact same thing J.P. Morgan and fucking Henry Ford tried to do back then. Henry Ford was a big socialist. He's like, I'm already rich. Y'all need to work for me. Pay attention. This is history repeating itself. But since y'all didn't pay attention in history class, you can't recognize this shit. Wake the fuck up. You need to educate your own children. They told you, like Rockefeller told you. The reason I put so much money in education, because I'm not trying to educate people. I'm trying to raise a society of workers. They're doing it to us again. They distract you with reality shows. They give you a false sense that you can have that shit, but then they want you to be a worker. Or right now, ain't enough jobs, so they don't want you to be a worker. They just want you to be a consumer. This is the shit that's going on. That's why this shit is so important, that we get the truth when it comes to, they got a derailment. How many people died? That's population control. They don't give a fuck about y'all.
But that's the thing. Everybody is so caught up in these stories. and they're watching the skies, and they're watching the railroads and the trains and all this nonsense.
And they're not watching their own bank account.
The problem is that all of those things that I just mentioned, the balloons, the 4 Chinese balloons, and the 4 trains, four is not a good number in Chinese alchemy and in Chinese divination. But 4 balloons and 4 derailed trains. Okay? Now, there's a saboteur element where there could be agents within the transportation department, agents within the United States government, agents within the military that are sympathetic to these communists from these foreign countries or these foreign governments, and they want to destroy the way of life here in the United States by poisoning the water, by poisoning the livestock, by doing all these things to contaminate the food supply and the air that we breathe to weaken people from the inside out. So then there's that. And then there's the angle that all these things that I just mentioned are just a big diversion to keep your attention away from things while intelligence agencies are fighting to keep Europe on the petrodollar. And by keeping them on the petrodollar, by controlling the source of where the oil comes from through that pipeline and eliminating the Nord Stream 1 and 2, because there's more than one, eliminating both of these and gaining control over these and preventing Russia, who has no GDP, who doesn't make anything except oil. Okay? The grain that's generated comes from the Ukraine. All right? That's another reason why people are fighting to control the Ukraine, is that's the breadbasket of Europe, not North America, because we got Nebraska and Kansas and the rest of the Midwestern states to thank for that. But they want to control the food and the fuel resources, fossil fuel resources in that part of the world. How do you do that? Well, instead of doing it on land, we'll just do some sneaky shit and we'll go underwater. We'll send like G.I. Joe mission of Navy SEALs and underwater demolition, teams to go down there and blow up this pipeline. And so you control the power of Russia, really, because now they don't have any oil coming from that part of the world anymore. And so now that's fucking them up. And so now Russia is being attacked by the U.S. through the intelligence agencies and special forces underwater, hitting their pipeline, and then over land by having the U.S. Army Special Forces training these guys using military contractors, instead of directly through the military, to train these soldiers in Ukraine. So, yeah, it's a war with Russia, but it's not a flat-out war with Russia. Meanwhile, this Chinese balloon nonsense is going on, and then people are wondering, why is the U.S. allowing themselves to be punked by China over and over and over again? Here's why: because they like Chinese money. Because
that's all it is.
Because
that's all it is.
It's all about money. And listen, hold on. This quote was in the header of the last episode. I'm sorry, of the episode before last with Affiliated, and how it said, there was a quote by General Smedley Butler: the U.S. dollar goes where it can find the best interest rates. Well, that happens to be overseas, and the flag follows the dollar, and soldiers follow the flag. You see, and you can pretty much figure out what happens after that. What happens after that is Nord Stream 1 and 2. What happens after that is the war in Ukraine. Not a war with China because they're sending over balloons spying on us.
We should have been bombed China.
But because it's about money at the end of the day. Everybody gets so caught up in patriotism. Man, there are no more patriots that are controlling the strings. You got real patriots that are in the military 100%, 3,000%. But they're not pulling the strings. The problem is, just like Smedley Butler says, those guys, those loyal men that will go and crack skulls wherever Sam tells them to go, they're being controlled by men who are beholden to bankers. Those generals that are running the military now are beholden to people in the U.S. State Department that are beholden to bankers.
Hey, check this out. So I was listening to the radio the other day, and there was this reverend on there. He's a white guy. He's a reverend, and apparently he was at some meeting in D.C. or some meeting someplace where the Chinese government was trying to flex a muscle in the meeting. He's like, "Man, fuck y'all. I don't agree." He's a reverend, so he didn't say fuck y'all. He said, "I'm going to do a peaceful protest," and he leaves, jumps in his car. He leaves. He said, "Hey, I leave the meeting because I told him I'm going to do a protest outside the Chinese embassy." So he goes to the Chinese consulate and starts to do a protest just by itself. White man got some balls, and the Secret Service showed up and said, "You can't be on the sidewalk. It belongs to China." He said, "No, it doesn't." He said, "Behind the fence belongs to China." So they were about to arrest him. He said, "Well, hold on, before you arrest me, let me move my car." So he goes and moves his car to a different parking lot. Comes back. By then, he said the D.C. Metro Police show up, the Park Police, all these different police, and so he said, "Get a captain down here." So the sergeant calls the captain, and they said, "Wait a minute." They start arguing with the Secret Service, and explains to him, "Yes, he's correct. This is not Chinese property. It's inside their Chinese property." He said, "Well, the point to my story is why, why would," he said, "most people, if the Secret Service had said that, they would have backed off. Why is the Secret Service sticking up for China in this situation? Why are you not sticking up for the individual, the American? But you instantly said that China was right, that this is their sidewalk. No, they do not own the sidewalk outside the consulate. They own everything behind that fence." And that's just an example of Chinese money. Chinese money is bullying the world, but China don't have it together. And like I said, pretty soon their money.
No, but see, China can't bully anybody physically because they don't have the military might.
No, their military has the most people.
They are a paper tiger.
Yeah, they got the most people in there. They got 2.9 million people in the military. Yes, but they ain't got the weapons. They don't have the fuel. They don't have this. They don't have that. But they do have that dollar because they have a large middle class.
They can barely hold on to their middle class.
Yeah, very intelligent. And we talked about this in past podcasts. That the reason China is going overseas is because right now most people's money is based on GDP. So if your people aren't producing, you don't have any products, then all of a sudden your GDP disappears. That's why we've been telling everybody we need to figure out who the next China is. Looks like it's going to be India. So if you want to invest in a shipping company in India, invest in India because they're going to start becoming the manufacturer leader of the future, I think. That's just my opinion. But this is definitely like China, they're going to lose that power. So they're going to do everything to keep it. We just need to recognize that sometimes people like Biden, who are supposed to have our best interest at heart, that they have that like you said, that dollar's best interest at heart. And they want the dollar from China. They want the money from China. They want the yen. They don't care about us. So there's no reason that we should not be kicking China's ass on a regular basis. We should be slapping them around. Why the hell? Balloons, nigga? Balloons? Balloons. That's your spy thing, a balloon. You mean to tell me you ain't got? Come on, man. So obviously they don't have this. They don't have this.
But if you think about it, though, it is smart in a way because the propulsion system that they're using doesn't give off a large heat signature.
Yeah. That's why I was wondering, like, can they actually see that on radar? Like, there is some intelligence to it, but it lets you know that they're not state of the art. They're not on our level when it comes to technology, even though they're China and they're supposed to be the computer guys. Don't fall for that shit. That's a narrative. People are buying a narrative and they're not buying reality. That's what we're trying to get across to y'all.
There it is. Yeah. Narrative, not reality. And I mean, dude, like that really sums it up in a nutshell because people have an idea of what reality is, but it's not what you think it is. That's the sad part, is that it's not what you think it is. The things in your personal life, you have control over that. But nationalism and security and all these things outside of that on a larger scale is all smoke and mirrors. Look, that's all I got. We out. Peace.
Holla back.